What were women's roles in Old Testament sacrifices? Did they ever participate, and were they covered by husbands or fathers' sacrifices? And what about widows?
I don't think Christians ever sacrificed women, did we?
Not about women being sacrificed.
Oh, okay. Okay, gotcha. Sorry.
About women participating in the giving of sacrifices.
Oh, okay, gotcha.
So yeah,
it's a little ambiguously worded. So
yeah, sacrificing women. No, I don't think that's anything that biblically ever went on. At least not that satisfied God. I'm sure some people did it and received judgment for it.
Clinton's going to get us banned from YouTube.
Yeah, there we go.
Oh. Yeah, this is not an area that I'm very knowledgeable in, so I'll kick the question over to you guys.
Patrick,
I wouldn't say I'm very knowledgeable either. I mean, just from my understanding, I believe they could participate as much as any man who wasn't a priest could, as far as bringing an animal. But when it came to getting it on the altar and doing the religious ceremony, it was the high priest and the priest that carried it out. I mean, the temple itself was divided into the holy place and the holies of holies, and not just anybody could enter that, man or woman. So I'd be willing to bet also that on the widow aspect, I don't know that happened because of how the marriage laws was set up, where if you had your kinsman redeemer, if your husband died, then a brother or somebody was supposed to marry you, because that's how their society was set up. And so I don't know that there was many widows unless they were very old. And I would just, this is as much a guess of anything, but I would guess that a woman could bring a sacrifice to the temple and then hand it over to the priest like everybody else in Israel did, because only the priests could perform the religious ceremonies. So that would be my educated, non-educated guess on how it was taken.
Yeah, that's pretty much my understanding too.
I was right about one of them in my head, and I just found it, but there were two other roles, and I haven't read enough to figure that one out because I never thought about it either. If you remember right, when the priest went to make a sacrifice once a year, he had a rope tied around his foot, and at the bottom of his garment he had bells. So because if the bells were ringing, that means he was still alive, and if the bells weren't ringing, of course, then he had sinned, and God struck him dead then. The first thing that came to mind when I read the question, because my wife sews, my mother-in-law sews, I kept thinking, well, who sews those bells on? And then there's a book right here written that says that's what the girls do, and that's how they supported this. And it's a really this is a Jewish book written. I don't know what year it was, but it lists their roles, but it's not ABC. You have to keep reading. So that was the first thing that was confirmed. I didn't find out whether or not they've made a sacrifice yet. I have to read it a little faster. I don't know who's coming with these questions, but I wish I would have got an email on them. Then I could read ahead of time and have knowledge. I'm learning right this second. See the smoke?
Yeah, man. How many preachers do you think we'd have today if they had that stringent requirement to be without sin whenever they took the pulpit?
Yeah. Wow.
Or they
had to be without sin to take the pulpit. I said I'd be without a job. That's one of the great things that is just a blessing, that I'm able to be such a wonderful example to my congregation of an imperfect person following God imperfecly. Get to live out weakness and foolishness on a daily basis in front of them.
Right. Yeah.
So, this is one of those things that was kind of odd, and I mean, same thing y'all have already said, that just women weren't involved. It was the religious practice, right? That it was the priests who were doing it. So you came for whatever sacrifice was needed to be made, man or woman, for whatever the law provided, and that's what you brought. But the priests are actually the ones who did the sacrificing, right? You brought it, but they performed it. And so were there, now that's interesting. It just occurred, I hadn't really read into it, that the Levites, were there female Levites that were performing tasks and doing things in the temple and doing all that?
Well, this book, this book that I'm reading right now, it's just like us. There's 20 questions that this woman asked that's just like us. Like, do I get to eat the meat that my husband eat? Do we get to chew the bones that they ate? I mean, it's just a bunch of questions. We're behind the times on asking questions. I mean, there's like, oh my gosh, this woman who wrote this thing asked questions back then that people were struggling with answering.
Okay. I think we've about answered that to the best of our knowledge and ability, unless we just sit here and wait for Dave to read something else. So.
Yeah. I mean, I never really thought about it, because as far as I do, there really weren't any different requirements for women as opposed to men. That they would take the sacrifices and the priest would go in and sacrifice on the altar for everyone. So